Kia ora. My name is Mike Hopkins and welcome to Carbon and Energy News you may have missed for the week ending 12th of March 2021. This is our brief roundup of news stories that have mostly escaped the attention of the mainstream media. Today, we're going to be catching up on whether the green recovery was really green, just how wasteful we can be, and what the explosion of interest in Bitcoin could mean for our environment. We use reliable sources of information when putting this broadcast together and relay that information in good faith. However, if you intend using or citing any of the information you hear here, please make sure you're comfortable with its accuracy before doing so. First then, much fanfare was heard about building back better and applying COVID recovery funds towards greening economies globally. Well, it turns out only 18% of the 14.6 trillion US dollars of funds allocated last year were directed towards greening measures. That's according to a report from the UN Environment Programme and Oxford University. The report covered 50 countries. It seems Spain and Germany led the way when it came to low carbon energy. France and the UK led the way on energy efficiency spending, and greening of transport received fairly widespread attention, but the 18% total is still disappointing. In another UNEP report published this week, it was recorded that 17% of all food available to consumers in 2019 found its way into the bin. The Food Waste Index report estimates 931 million tons of food was wasted. Put in other ways, that's around 23 million 40-ton trucks, or 121 kilos per global citizen. Households seem to be the major culprits, with wastage of 11%. Food services wasted 5% and retailers only 2%. And yes, I know that doesn't quite add up to the 17, that comes to 18, but obviously there's some rounding in there. In New Zealand, the Reserve Bank has recently been instructed to factor housing affordability into its decision making. Interesting then that the Bank of England has just had its remit amended to include supporting the government's net zero carbon targets. Is this something our finance minister should be putting on the agenda to add to the list of activities for the RBNZ? We've seen a surge in interest in Bitcoin over the past few months. One of the unheard implications of this is the surge in emissions associated with Bitcoin. Bitcoins are created by computers undertaking complex calculations called mining. The mining experience is diminishing marginal returns, meaning over time the calculations become more complex and use more electricity per unit created. It's estimated that currently around 60% of the cost of creating a unit is the power bill. Bitcoin already consumes about the same level of energy as Norway, that's around 80 terawatt hours a year. The recent surge will see that, and of course the emissions associated with it, increase markedly. For more information on that, check out the story in The Guardian. It seems advocates for both the environment and legalization of cannabis may be facing a modest dilemma. We saw some research this week concluding the legalization of cannabis in Colorado has led to a measurable increase in the state's emissions. It seems the growing cannabis industry, no apology for that pun, it was entirely intended, has quite significant emissions implications. Researchers at Colorado State University estimate that each kilo of product accounts for 2,000 kilograms of CO2. The emissions increase is driven by increased electricity use because cannabis is mostly grown indoors in the US. The package and shipping makes up 500 kilograms of emissions per kilo. That's of the 2,000. The figure, of course, differs by state depending on the emissions profile of their electricity sectors. Switching to outdoor production would reduce emissions by 96%. Food for thought in the cannabis debate. If there was something in our broadcast today that you haven't heard before, please like, share, or subscribe, depending on what platform you're using. That lets us know we're providing some useful or interesting snippets of information. We'll be back soon with more news you may have missed. Please take care and stay safe.